So after Sweden announced plans to expel as many as 80,000 of its 163,000 refugees that have entered their country in 2015, Finland has joined its Nordic neighbor and announced that they will deport up to two-thirds of the refugees who entered that country last year. The panel is back with me. Morgan, you talked about this crazy epiphany that, you know what, it just won't work. It's just, there's a cultural clash there, magnified by these events that happened throughout Europe, but particularly Cologne, Germany, on New Year's.
Yeah, I think Europe has really struggled with how to have an effective immigration policy. And as I said earlier, this is the kind of stuff that happens after years of failed policies. Are there plenty of people that can come and integrate? Sure, but I think you have to have the cultural mechanisms in place for people to immigrate, to be a part of the society. And I think in what you're seeing in these countries is clearly that it's just not happening.
I remember 4 or 5 years ago when the True Finns became a big political party in Finland, and a lot of people said, well, you know what, the True Finn thing was all about being, you know, a white European, and it was racist, and they took a lot of heat, but now we see that whole Eurocentric thing spreading throughout the continent. Part of it is the Euro, which, by the way, means open borders, but part of it also is about culture, preserving culture, and that's not a racist thing, is it, Mitch?
Not at all. And one thing that these guys would never have done in their own country, these North African and the Middle Eastern immigrants, they never would have done this at home. It's a definite disrespect to European culture. They wouldn't have done this to...
But why wouldn't they? But don't they have a lack of respect at home, and they import that with them? Well, with respect to women.
Many of their societies are based on a sliding scale of shame and honor. They wouldn't want to dishonor their families by doing something against women while there. And they would get in a lot of trouble at home. They don't behave this way in their own country against women from their own country and their own culture. It's a complete disrespect for the culture that they're ostensibly trying to be a part of.
Well, you can be disrespectful, too, if you think there's going to be limited punishment or no punishment at all, right?
Absolutely. But I think one thing that's maybe worth pointing out is that it's not going to be the refugees that are coming from Syria, not going to be the refugees from Iraq that are going to be deported. They're talking about people that do not get asylum status. That's people coming from West Africa, coming from Bangladesh, even people coming from Kosovo or Albania. I mean, I remember being on the refugee trail, seeing, ethnic Serbs who are really poor, coming up trying to get in the refugee line, get blankets. These are the people that are going to be kicked out. So I think while it's true that I guess Sweden can't handle this many people, it's not going to necessarily affect the cultural problem.
Well, I mean, Steve, what do you make of it?
Charles, there's a lot of talk about the refugees regarding their welfare, their safety. No one wants to see children, women, and men starving in the desert. But by golly, we got to think about our people, our children, our elderly, our American people, their safety. We don't have the intelligence mechanisms in place right now to vet every single one of these individuals. So what I say is set that, put that pause button on, get the intelligence apparatus there so that they're vetted properly. But we must think about our people first.
And the United States, I think, actually has done a pretty good job about this. You have Europe just, throwing all the existing rules out the window.
I think we've done a terrible job.
Yeah.
We've done, Jillian, a terrible job.
We haven't had open borders, though, like Europe has had. That's a pretty significant distinction.
Well, they're flown across the Mexican border, and they could certainly flow across the Canadian border.
It's not the same. It's not thousands of people crossing the border every single day. It's in no way the same thing.
It's not a million like it was with Germany. And I think, Morgan, that's what we're going to see. That's where I think we'll see the final political upheaval. If Angela Merkel can somehow keep her career in check. I mean, she was a hero. She was a lioness for so long. And I think if the German people finally say, listen, it didn't work, then I think that puts the whole thing down the tubes with respect to all of Europe.
I think the bottom line here is no one at this table and no one watching, as you said, wants to see innocent people starving and on the street. And it's clearly a big problem. I think the candidates should speak to this tonight. There's several candidates who've talked about having safe zones in Syria, having safe zones in all these places. You can't solve, ultimately, long-term, the refugee problem without solving the problem of Assad, without solving Syria. That's the real issue, and that's where people need to be consistent. We've seen our friends that are senators that have been entirely inconsistent on their approach.
It would be fantastic if we fought these wars to win them occasionally, particularly with ISIS, right? All right.